Hi guys, and welcome to another video. In this video is a continuation of a series where I'm going through how you can tell what's happened to a graph based on its equation or based on its function, just knowing whether or not it's been translated or transformed just by looking at its equation and what that kind of looks like as well. So I've gone through two examples already when you're adding and subtracting k to the right hand side or to a function, and also when you're actually adding or subtracting a certain number from x itself. Okay, so two different examples, and we're going to go through another two. Okay, so what I'm going to go through is what happens when you have a negative function. Now, when you have a negative in there, it's going to actually flip the function. Now, it can flip a function left to right or over the y-axis, or it can also flip across the x-axis as well. And I'm going to show you what those look like, because the negatives can be put in two different places. Okay, so if we multiply the right-hand side of an equation, or a function, sorry, I should say, by -1, it will make the function look like this. Okay, it's going to put the negative on the outside of the whole function. Okay, so it's going to reflect over the x-axis. Okay, so and the way you can actually plot them and actually figure that is multiply the y coordinate by -1, and I'm going to explain what that means in a minute. Okay, so let's see if I can draw that and what that looks like. I'm going to erase some of this from the previous example here. Okay, so I'm going to draw my graph again. I'm going to give you an example of a different f of x. So previously I showed you what it is if f of x was a cubic. I'm going to show you what it looks like if it's like a different graph here. So if it looks like this, okay, if that's my original, now I'm going to show you what does it look like if it's a negative f of x. So if it looks like this, okay, and what I've mentioned is that I'm multiplying the y coordinate by -1. So for example, if this here was 1, 2, for example, to be able to reflect over the x-axis, I'm going to multiply my y coordinate by -2. So it's going to become 1, -2. So let's plot that. So it's going to go across 1, go down -2. That's my next spot. Okay, so for example, if this was 3, 3, this would be 3, -3. I'm going to go across 3, down 3. That would be my next spot, and so forth, so forth. So it would help us figure out how to plot it over the x-axis. So this would be y equals negative f of x. Okay, so that's what happens to the graph or to your function if it is multiplied by -1, or it becomes a negative. Now, the alternative to this is when you replace x by -x. So the actual x itself is being multiplied by -1, not the whole function, just the x is negative. Okay, so what happens? So it's going to look like this. It's going to be y equals f -x. So you see how that's different to this one here? It's different. You're like, the negative is in a different place, and you've got to be able to identify, oh, if it's on the outside, it means it's flipped over the x-axis. If it's inside within it, it's going to become a reflection over the y-axis. Okay, so it is reflected over the y-axis, and that means you have to multiply the x coordinate by -1. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to use the same example of this f of x here. I'm not going to use the cubic because it's easier to reflect. Okay, so this is my original y equals f of x. Now, if I want to reflect over the y-axis, I'm going to multiply my x coordinate by -1. So for example, like I mentioned before, if this is 1, 2, to be able to reflect over the y-axis, I'm going to multiply my x coordinate by -1. So multiply this one here by -1, so it becomes -1. So instead of plotting it now on this side in this quadrant here, I'm now going to plot it here. So it's becoming -1 up to That becomes my first point. Okay, then I'm going to go, if that was, like I mentioned before, 3, 3, then I'm going to go across back to -3 instead. So that becomes a -3. So it's -2, -3, up 3. That'll be my next point. And then I could use that method to help me correctly reflect it over the y-axis. Okay, so those are 2 other examples of how a graph can be translated or transformed. So in this particular video, I've shown you how a graph might be reflected over the x and y axes and how to plot that. So if you were given an example and you need to make that transformation, how do you do it? And how do you perfectly reflect it over the x and y axis?